Welcome to our fourth event of the State of FemTech Plus series. Today we're going to be talking about shaping the future of digital health, and we have a pleasure to talk with experts with three different perspectives on digital health. Let's welcome Reenita, a partner and senior vice president at Frost&Sullivan and board member of High Tech High Heels. She also runs global businesses for healthcare consulting, and she is a speaker and futurist in healthcare and digital technologies. Let's also welcome Maree Beare, a founder and CEO of Wanngi, an Australian startup that is developing a multi-platform app that allows people to have a track on their health and well-being records. Her work has been recognized by Forbes in the top 50 women-led startups disrupting health tech. Let's welcome also Debra, a CMO and president at Nuvo Group. She was president of global marketing services of Johnson & Johnson. She served on the Global Women's Leadership Initiative Steering Committee. So let's welcome all of the three experts today.
Welcome, and just a small introduction of hosts today. I'm Sarah and this is Claudia. We work for a company, Untitled Kingdom. Our main focus, we are a product development studio and software. And our main focus is FemTech and digital health and IoTs. And last year we wrote an ebook on State of FemTech. When we were writing the ebook and trying to cover all the subjects related to FemTech, we found it's actually impossible right now because how mature FemTech became and how big it is already. And in our series before, in our events that happened in the last 3 weeks, we covered some subjects that we found most interesting so far in FemTech. And today we want to talk about digital health because we believe that it's impossible to talk about FemTech without talking about digital health and the other way around. After all, FemTech is derived from digital health and it's still connected from the moment it appeared when we started creating startups regarding women's health. They are still mostly focused on health. So today we want to talk about health tech, about digital health generally, but also from the perspective of women's health and how it shapes FemTech industry. So just a quick information for our attendees. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in Q&A section. If you ask them in the chat section, we'll try to answer them as well. And during the event today, we're going to try to read the questions and answer them during the discussion. If we have time, we'll try to answer all of them. If not, we'll try to follow up in emails with answers to the questions that we don't get to answer today. And I think that's all.
So let's try. Okay. Today we have, I think, two main challenges in the world. First of it is global warming, which is not covered today by us, but the second is global sickening, actually. With high costs, with low efficiency of healthcare systems. So in your opinion, what are the main problems that healthcare systems are facing today?
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sure.
I think as an industry overall, if we look at healthcare, it's been one of the laggards of embracing technology till 5 years ago, despite the fact that every other industry has a consumer-focused business. Healthcare does not see, it's the only industry that really doesn't see the patient, the person as a consumer at the center of the ecosystem. The other big challenge we've obviously had is the cost. I mean, the costs of healthcare are escalating. The US healthcare GDP is 18%, and yet it's not like people in the US are living long lives. The cost of chronic diseases is $3 trillion. I mean, it's huge. And therefore, we definitely need some interventions. And the way the COVID crisis has been handled by, if you look at it by other countries in the world, there's been much higher efficiency in a lot of ways that they have handled the system compared to what has happened in the United States specifically. So even though I don't want to put the showcase on the US, I do feel that with the development of technology and the maturity of the healthcare systems, we're often going behind rather than going forward.
Well, I'll give one double click on what Reenita said and one additional challenge. So I agree that healthcare has been laggard in embracing technology. And really, we've been tethered to site-based care and very paternalistic care. So let me just talk about pregnancy, which is the need state that I'm in currently. So I, as a pregnant woman, have to travel to a doctor's office and sit in an infectious waiting room or walk through hospital doors to get my wellness care. I'm pregnant, I'm well. I don't want to be in a place where sick people are treated. I want to be monitored and be empowered in the convenience of my own home. And technology is an enabler there, yet we've been laggard to embrace it. The paternalistic part is the doctor knows a lot more than I do. My womb is a black box. I want to understand what's happening with my fetal health and my maternal health and talk to my doctor as a partner and be empowered in my journey. So one, tech has been laggard, as Reenita said. The other problem are just competing stakeholder interests, right? So in a fee-for-service world in US, a provider is rewarded for doing more procedures, a payer is rewarded for reducing costs and doing less procedures, and a patient's kind of squeezed in the middle because I just want to have my best journey and not worry about chasing the dollars, but chasing my best health outcome. So competing interests also impede optimal care.
And I can probably tag on to that as well. From the consumer perspective and what you've just explained, Debra, is the reason why consumers and people really just don't feel in control, because the current healthcare system, it's an unchanging legacy system that promotes passivity in people. And so, you know, they feel like their information is scattered everywhere and amongst numerous providers, and there's perception that it's just hard for them to get any information, and that's why they feel like that.
Yeah, and yep.
No, what I was saying is, I think, and that's why I believe that digital health will play a very, very substantial, exponential role. I really see digital health as a gateway to be able to look at how healthcare will be delivered in the future. Because not only is it consumerizing healthcare, it's also democratizing healthcare and globalizing it. So I see it as a tremendous platform where the patient is going to be, or the consumer is going to be at the center of this ecosystem. So it's a definite enabler for the transformation of our systems today.
Yeah, and speaking about the timeline of digital health industry, it has its beginning in 1981 where was discovered the first telemedicine system for patients. Then we had databases online for patients. Then was the Fitbit, for example. But in your opinion, what were the biggest game changers actually here that allowed digital health industry to develop that quickly?
In my opinion, it's COVID-19, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
So
I wanted to ask it.
I'm going to tag on to the COVID-19. So we would say that telehealth was available pre-COVID, but no one really used it. Right? Providers aren't technology leaning, patients are habitual in what they know, and suddenly COVID hits, and I describe it as a forcing mechanism for telehealth adoption, because suddenly doctors' offices are closed, people are being forced to distance, yet many can't go unchecked, so it forced the adoption, and now I also believe there's no turning back, and we can talk about that piece in a moment.
So
yeah, I don't think there's any turning back. I think that definitely agree with you that telehealth has it's actually provided the opportunity, or COVID's provided the opportunity to demonstrate that digital health has a place, and a significant place in the care of people. And as you said before, it's actually a safe option. It's provided a convenience option, and it can be a quality option, where consumers can receive quality care. But I guess what we have is there's some measures that we need to have in place that the consumers are getting what they're expected. I mean, something that also come out of this telehealth, I guess, growth was that because a lot of the legacy system really wasn't up to jumping straight into telehealth, and essentially the legacy system is based on funding models. What happened was a lot of consumers thought they were getting virtual care, but they're actually getting a phone call. So I think there's now the discussion is that this next level is, okay, if we're going to move ahead with digital health, it actually has to be quality, if that's what consumers are, quality and convenience, right? So, I mean, 90% of digital health consults were apparently phone calls, right? Rather than, certainly in our country. So, there has to be that moving towards, if they're expecting a service, what is that service?
Yeah, I hear doctors.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to take up what Maree said. I think we started the whole aspect of telehealth in a way because of COVID. It provided the social distancing and the ability to take care of you. But I think we're not there yet to talk about virtual care, because there's a huge difference between an appointment and care. And I think that is what now we have to look at building in the next few years, is building a platform of really what virtual care is about, which includes remote patient monitoring, which includes emergency response systems, and be able to create really a digital front door, which every other industry has done, whether it's banking or retail, which talks about the customer experience. So really what we're doing is we're saying we're doing telemedicine or telehealth, but really what we're doing is just, as Maree said, just appointments.
Yeah, so
exactly.
Televisits like this, right? I've had many televisits personally, and we maybe in the US we went a little bit beyond just the phone call to video, but you could be my doctor, Maree, and this is my visit, right? And you're asking me how I feel, and you're asking me to check my blood pressure. What I hear providers talk about, it builds on the platform idea that we really need a toolbox. Providers and patients need no compromise visits. So when I have my visit from home, it should be just like the office visit. So how do we deepen the phone call or the video infrastructure to have more remote monitoring tools, as one example? So it's a no compromise visit for patient or doctor. And therefore we could start creating more distributed care outside of the hospital and home, benefit from the convenience, but also not trade off any of the quality like we've been talking about.
And I think that's that opportunity where the consumer is going to be involved, or they've been called the patient in the past. So they're moving from being the patient to being actually involved in this appointment, right? So if they can come to the appointment, providing their own, self-monitoring information, which could be their history, it could be their symptoms. This is where we're moving to having people involved in the improvement of their diagnosis.
It's very interesting that you say that, because I was reviewing a research that we did just over the last 1 month in looking at consumer interest to first take care of their health and be empowered, but also their interest to do telehealth and virtual care in the future. And the results were over 10 countries, and we talked to about 2,000 consumers at different levels. And obviously the millennium generation have different higher results than the baby boomers. But overall, on average, we are finding that almost 50 to 60% of the population do want to have virtual care. And they're also open to share their data, which brings in the whole aspect of privacy. And so this is not going to go away, because consumers are driving this and they feel they're much more accountable. The other piece of data that I found was how medication adherence was such a big problem before COVID-19. And all of a sudden now, a lot of the challenges with medication adherence for chronic disease patients have been reduced because people are taking their medication much more. Whether it's because they're scared or whether they're much more in tune with their health because of what we are hearing and seeing in the media and the news every day. But that has created an awakening, a huge awakening among the consumer population across the world. And I think these are all very positive steps to bring in a consumer-focused healthcare system.
That's right. They're feeling like they have the opportunity to be involved, but then they need the tools. As Debra said before, is having the tools, and this is the move. So consumers have to date really haven't been very digital in their health. They're digital every other aspect of their lives, but this has provided an opportunity for an awakening for them to go, oh, okay, if I need to monitor my symptoms, I need to monitor my medication, my treatment plan. How am I going to do that? What are the tools that I need to be able to provide my information to transfer that communication to the doctor? So I guess it's that awakening, as you say, and let's use that opportunity to communicate to globally to people that there are tools and how can we bring them into the tent.
So I just wanted to read two responses from our guests. So first one is from Amy. Thank you for sharing the market data regarding interest in telehealth, Reenita. Do you have a link to that study? So if you have, we could maybe join it, like send it, share it with our guests in the email later. So
it's proprietary research, unfortunately. I just shared the top line findings, but if anyone is interested in talking to me about it, please feel free to email me or whatever. Get in touch.
Thank you. There is also interesting point of view from Benny. In digital health, we have thousands of different products. Many of them don't have evidence-based clinical trials that will prove their clinical benefits. Each one of them needs to connect to the enterprise system. Do we need large platforms that will overcome those issues? So we actually wanted to discuss one of the issue of digital health that with current regulations for digital health or just tech products, we really care very much about clinical trials only for those very obvious digital health products like pacemakers. Like we know that they have to be checked, they're secure, but there are a lot of products that are class 1, medical class 1 products, and they do give us information about our health, they do influence our decisions, and we do not really know what clinical trials they went through. So do you think that medical classification should be changed for new technology, for new digital health solutions that are currently on the market or are getting on the market?
Well, I would say it depends on what the job is that the device is doing. So I will tell you, in the case of Nuvo, we started out as a direct-to-consumer remote monitoring product. And then what we realized was the job of pregnancy monitoring and 2 lives at stake really required the responsibility of going deeper with clinical validation, with the FDA regulatory pathway as licensed to practice in the US. And we pivoted to a class 2 device, a medical grade strategy, because we are about maternal fetal health and connected care with the provider. That was a strategic choice because of the job that we do. There are other jobs in the ecosystem, right, that maybe don't require as much rigor. So I'd say, what is the job you're trying to do and what kind of regulatory structure and clinical validation is needed to do that responsibly and with confidence?
And a lot of the products in digital health today are fitness devices, they're wellness devices, they're food-related devices or trackers. and apps. So we don't need clinical evidence for them because they're trying to look at behavior modification, lifestyle modification, which is all good in terms of our health. So, if you look at Fitbit, it started as a fitness company completely in terms of their apps. And today, just yesterday, they released a stress test that is a watch that looks at your stress levels, and they look at the skin and they look at facial expressions and be able to assess what your stress level is and if it's going up or going down. And these are all good things to look at. It doesn't have clinical validation, but they're good for us to just know what is happening and create more self-awareness about our own health and take more responsibility.
I guess we were... Go on, Maree.
I think there's a difference of the what we're talking about in the essence here is that information that's input by devices in an automated way, that is really just used as a general wellness, and that we have Fitbit, but then we have devices and monitoring that do need to be medically verified. All right, but we're moving into a space where the self-monitoring is some of it really is about providing more information and insights for a diagnosis, right? And so some of it is emulating being able to provide information from the consumer that a doctor doesn't currently have. And some of it is just extending, I guess, some of the equipment that might be in a doctor's or a hospital location. So I think it's variable there. I noticed Benny was also asking about the platforms, and I think this is one of the problems of the healthcare system, which I mentioned before, in that there is an assumption that the whole healthcare system is connected, but essentially it's not. And so, are big organizations going to, or big companies going to solve that problem? Well, most likely not immediately, but I guess what we're moving towards is interconnectivity and using secure standards so that information about people or about the system can be transferred. So, we're overcoming some problems about in, I guess, sharing of data. But yeah.
So I'll click a little bit on the platform question too. I think there's two different points. One is platforms to provide care. I think it goes back to a point Reenita made earlier. So again, I'll just use my Nuvo example because it's topical. So Teladoc, Amwell, you need an infrastructure for telehealth broadly, but then you need specialists by need state, right? So off of a Teladoc or an Amwell, you need the pregnancy experts, right, who can help you understand and interpret your pregnancy health and what does that mean in the context of your total health for mother and baby. The other point is you need workflow interoperability into the healthcare system. Doctors have told us repeatedly they can open 15 different apps on their phone. They don't have the bandwidth. So we need to streamline the number of interfaces and wire the pipes into the electronic medical record, whether that's Cerner, Epic, whatever, right? So everything works together and is seamless from a user experience for both physician and patient.
Yeah, I agree with that, Debra.
Yeah, I agree too. I think interoperability is the biggest challenge today that digital needs to overcome. And I think in order to do that, the first thing we need to have is transparency. And I think healthcare is one of the most non-transparent, kind of things that we're working on. Incentives are not aligned. There's misalignment of incentives, whether it's doctors, nurses, caregivers, patients, insurance companies. And I think everything has to be towards one goal, and that is the patient. And I think now that's the challenge that we have to overcome in the next few years is aligning the incentives, aligning the systems to be all talking on the same with each other and to each other, not talking to different people at different times without that seamless flow of connectivity across the care continuum.
And that's correct. If the incentives align, then there is incentives to have connectivity to provide that opportunity for patient data to flow.
Yeah, and I think that for a very long time we were fighting the war about who is going to own the data. Was it the Apple, Googles that will own the data, or Amazon, or is it going to be the pharma companies, or is it going to be the payers? And I think I'm still not over that hurdle yet. It's not about who owns the data; it's the patient that is owning the data. So eventually, we have to take control as patients and consumers and have the data in one phone, which is our cell phone, which will store all the data. And we have the right to say we'll give you the data or not give you the data. So I think it has to get back to the consumer.
And that's exactly what we're doing with Wanngi, is providing a place where people can put their information on their phone and have a central view and be in control of that. And as you say, the difficulty for people to have that information on their phone is sometimes the collection of information. Sometimes because there is questions of ownership of health data. How do people actually get a hold of that information to have on their phone? And that's the challenge, which I guess as we move forward and we do have interconnectivity between systems, or as software vendors, we provide technology ways to make it easier for people to collect their health information. I know that's what we have a goal to do.
And I think
sorry, go ahead, Debra.
So the patient absolutely needs his or her data all in one place to really be empowered to have your best journey wherever you are, right? I had an emergency episode in Ecuador and I didn't speak fluent Spanish and I didn't have and it was a disaster, right? So the patient needs to have their health record, but the provider team needs access to one set of data too, right? So now with all of these comorbid patients, it's not only the primary care doctor, but all the supporting specialists, the cardiologists, the psychiatrists, the endocrinologists, they all need access to one data set to best triage the patient for care, for medication management. And that doesn't exist right now. And that's to the detriment of all stakeholders.
And I was thinking, how many times have we gone to a doctor's office if they're going to a new specialty, for example? Recently, I went to see an orthopedic and I had to fill out pages and pages of information in handwriting. And then I went to see another doctor in another specialty and I had to do the same thing. And I mean, all of us doing that despite belonging to one system.
Mm-hmm. Well, and often there's a case, you might belong to one system or one, healthcare system, and you as a consumer, you believe that your data is there, but as soon as you travel out of that region, you've lost it, and there you are, helpless and out of control. And then if you go to see a doctor or a provider, you have to repeat the same information over and over, and all of that history is lost. It's like you don't exist if you travel, right? So this is why digital health is all about bringing that center of information to the consumer, because until we actually, if it ever happens, that there is connectivity between all of the systems, what we see when you have a chronic condition and you're seeing multiple doctors, you become the point of truth. You're passing on the information, you're validating whether you've had tests before and after. So, it's that, how do we, that's what we're aiming to do, is to provide that one place for people to have that information if they can.
On the other hand, though, providing security for this type of data and keeping it in one place, especially on users' phone, that can be stolen and can be hacked very easily. Well, maybe not hacked very easily, but if it's taken physically from a person, it's pretty simple to get access to it. I guess from people's perspective, from consumers' perspective, on one hand, they would like to have a great experience where they go to the doctor no matter where, or they get to the emergency and they're not conscious, and the doctors, the physicians get all their information. That would, of course, be perfect. But on the other hand, I think we're all scared about our data, about security, how this data can be used, because hacking our health data sounds scary, but I guess it's even more scary if this data is sold to
employers that discriminate against me and things like that, right?
To employers, to insurance companies that can somehow use it for calculations and so on. So it is pretty scary, and I guess people don't trust it that much. And I really hope that the situation with COVID, just like all the other crises before, were some kind of stepping stone for technology that was solving a problem that currently people see that we actually needed. Digital health existed before and people were building it and investing it, but I think most of the consumers didn't really feel that big of a need before that they do feel now, especially after those phone calls with doctors and feeling like talking to some random person and not really knowing what's happening and how to get the feeling of actually being taken care of by the doctor.
Yeah, and I want to follow that because I'm an optimist and I see the first step to centralize those data. We have Wanngi, we have great examples of governmental systems, centralized governmental systems like in Europe is Germany or Denmark. And a few days ago, actually, we had information about India and Health ID. So we have those positive examples. So I believe that will spread to all over the world.
Well,
some of the northern European states are just amazing in terms of electronic medical records. You look at, I recently spent time in Estonia 2 years ago, and it was just amazing to see how systems work. So obviously these countries are very small and smaller populations, but it's definitely possible.
Well, we do have an example in Australia of a digital health record as well. However, what has happened is often is a miscommunication to people about what that means, and often there is a perception of fear about the security, and that becomes the first decision making around whether this is of value to people or not. Now, if we can communicate to consumers about what the value is for them to have access to their health information, if they think about the situation as it is now, their health information is actually in a lot of different places now already. All right, so hospitals have a copy of their health record, the doctors, their childcare, schools, the list goes on. What is it, insurance companies? So there is many different locations where a person's health information is stored. Now, what's the security and the information consequences around that? They don't have any control over that. All right, so if a consumer says, well, look, I'm not going to go and have a health record that's supplied by the government or access or view a health record that's provided by an insurance company, they're actually locking themselves out of a source of informed decision making, right? So if we step forward and say, look, you're opening the door to some helpful information for yourself to actually help yourself improve your diagnosis, improve your ability to communicate, and that being the point that we provide that communication rather than going, talking about health records as going fear, crisis, security. Yes, they are the fundamental aspects that vendors and software vendors need to develop their systems on. But is that the first step of communicating about health to people? I don't think so.
I also think it's understanding what the data means, because if I get deluged with too much data and I don't really understand what it means and what I should do about it, it's not really actionable. So I think part of it also is, how do we harness the data in a format that's clinically actionable and actionable from a patient engagement and empowerment standpoint, right? Which is also part of the opportunity.
The other big challenge we're facing today in the world across is the whole aspect of social determinants of health. I mean, how many people have access to a stable Wi-Fi connection or a laptop or a tablet to be able to even do a virtual care visit? And I mean, we saw this in the US in so many remote areas where the connectivity is not good and they have to go into sometimes and use school equipment. We've seen this in the school system, just for example, our kids who, we're having such a challenge in providing laptops to them. So I think that's another big thing that we have to think about in terms of access. Everyone doesn't have the same level of access digitally. We're not literate in terms of digital literacy, the same level. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in governance and stewardship in this whole realm if that has to work the way we want it to work.
Yeah, and actually, speaking about countries and differences in those countries, a few weeks ago, I read an opinion of Unity Stokes. He's a president and co-founder of Startup Health Organization. And he said a very interesting thing, and I just needed to wait to our discussion today to ask you and to shout out that statement because he said that in terms of the development of digital health, India is 5 or 6 years ahead of the United States. And the United States are 5 or 6 years ahead of Europe in terms of using those digital health solutions. So what's your point of view on that slightly controversial statement?
I don't know what, when he said we're ahead, India is 5 times ahead of the US, exactly what he's talking about specifically, because the health ID card was just put down by Narendra Modi in India Independence Day on the 15th of August. But I think what he's really talking about in a sense is that India became financially digital about 5 years ago, and now everyone has a financial identity in India. And I think they're doing the same thing and doing that for healthcare. So I think it's definitely there's one system that people are following. And I think US is not following one system. There's so many competing systems in the US. So I think from that perspective, I would say that some of these countries are much further ahead than the US.
Benny actually just shared information with us that in Israel, there is a system in place that connects all the information from public and private healthcare, and it's all available. So that's great. And I guess most of the countries currently are trying to get there, although it's understandable that creating the solutions privately is close to impossible. It's very difficult to get access to public health data, and creating it on the other side from the public perspective, it's extremely expensive, and it just takes a lot of time, like with most public initiatives. So it's understandable that it takes years to build solutions like that, but it's great that they are in place already in some countries.
I think just to add on to that, I think they're excellent. Those opportunities for having the systems connected can only help the people involved. But I'd just like to add on to that with all of those systems, they are seen from the doctors or the healthcare systems perspective, and often the consumers don't get a look in. So there's opportunity, and this is where the digital health for consumers opportunity is there's information that's captured for us, and that's the healthcare, or that's the systems like Benny mentioned, and there's digital health or information captured by us. And I think the opportunity moving forward is also the addition of the information captured by us as people. You think about when a person goes to a doctor, if you have a chronic condition, that is what the physician wants, right? When you go to see them, they want to know what's your health history, what's been happening. They can see some on their systems, right? But they want to know from the last visit what's been happening, all right? And this either the self-monitoring that Debra's been talking about, or the ability for the people themselves to start monitoring that information, monitoring their symptoms, capturing other information about their life that may or may not be contributing to their condition. And also what we have is in developed countries and underdeveloped countries, we also have environmental factors that are influencing people's health. Right. And this is where, you know, there's air quality. We've had fires here in Australia. There's fires in California. What started to happen is the understanding of the influence of things such as air quality are having on people's health, and we've started we've started providing that in Wanngi, actually in the daily health forecasts that we provide people as a notification. We're providing them air quality as well, because we saw what was happening here in with Australia with the bushfires. And, you know, we have 8 months later, you know, medical evidence that women that were pregnant during those bushfires delivered early and delivered smaller babies. Now, this is horrendous for those people involved, but what we need to provide opportunities for people to be influenced by conditions around them and how that influences their health. And this is where having people involved in this is going to help them. They can be more informed.
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts of data. One is creating a more robust picture of the consumer, like you're saying. So patient-reported outcomes, right, are more context that should bolster the electronic health record. I think that's really important. The other thing I'll build on, Benny, Nuvo's an Israeli company, and I think there's benefit to the global ecosystem. So our lead market is the US, but we formed a data partnership with Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem because they have the longitudinal database of tracking people's health journeys over many years, so we can correlate different data understanding to long-term outcomes. So the other thing I'd say on data, 1, create a more robust picture like Maree's speaking to, and 2, how do we create more of a global partnership ecosystem and leverage data partnerships to really make us all stronger, given some are more advanced, some are less advanced, like you noted.
And that's where I see if we have long-term data from people, and it may be that they, you know, there's concern about sharing of data, but if we provide people an opportunity, for example, if I talk about, say, endometriosis, right, there's at the moment, you know, women that have this problem, it takes a long time for them to be diagnosed, and it needs an operation for them to be diagnosed to see how serious the condition is. I mean, you know, are those women, if they have an opportunity and they've been providing, or, you know, self-monitoring for a period of time, it might happen that those women, you know, care about providing data about their journey for the benefit of research. You know, this is where if we, you know, put the questions back to consumers to say, do you want to do that at some point in the future? You know, we will have, or we may have a resounding yes, or we may have a resounding no from some. But if we give that opportunity to people, then, you know, I think in many cases they will say yes.
Facebook provides an enormous opportunity. And if you look at all the health groups in Facebook, it's all patient-reported data where people are getting advice and suggestions. And, you know, that's like a gold mine, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of the group discussions that happen and the number of people that are following and participating in those. But the other question is then who is actually controlling consumer data today? And it's really Facebook, because we're putting our entire life on some of these sites. So, you know, Facebook knows which air quality we are breathing, where we are, when we're traveling, what we're eating. And all of that is extremely good lifestyle data that needs to be then integrated with the medical and the clinical data. So I think we're moving to an area, you know, of focus of what I call personnomics, which is personal data along with the omics data and the genomics data and the gene data that is there from 23andMe and others, and combining that into the holistic picture of the patient. But it's being derived from our social media.
Yeah.
Go on.
Reenita just mentioned Facebook, but what about other giants like Amazon, like Samsung, like Apple, or Johnson & Johnson? What is the role of those companies in digital health?
So I'm back to the ecosystem idea. I don't think anyone has a magic bullet. I don't think anyone has a total solution. So we need to learn to partner with different players in the ecosystem. So I would say Amazon has fundamentally changed people's expectations of everything. I want everything immediately tailored just for me. You know, I want someone that knows me as well as my partner. Right? Amazon's fundamentally changed our expectations of what an experience looks like. If you look at Johnson & Johnson, right, where I came from before Nuvo, they're an amazing partner in the ecosystem of finding early startups and fueling them with know-how and resource and opportunity to get their footing in healthcare, right? Google with kind of big data and analytics and cloud-based computing can bring other capabilities. So I feel like those who ultimately win will be those that are most savvy at navigating and building an ecosystem of partners, because none of us could do that alone. And that's not an easy task, but it's what we all need to do.
So if you take Amazon, for example, they have 100 million Prime members today. They're pushing their pill pack, their online pharmacy to all these 100 million people all over the world. They have tied up with insurance companies to be able to do that. They bought Health Navigator, which is their Amazon to take care of primary care. So if you see any of these companies, they're kind of working with a solid strategy one by one in terms of acquisitions or building. If you look at Google, they have 57 health startups in their portfolio today. Google Cloud, they're making such huge, big investments. The one that was made 100 million in Anvil. They're working in radiology AI. They're working in women's health. I mean, all of these companies are, really making solid investments in terms of creating the infrastructure. And they have a lot of startups that they're acquiring every single day. So I think what all of these companies have in common is that they have access to consumers, and they're taking this access to consumers and building the framework to create a consumer-driven healthcare information system, healthcare system that operates from the consumer level. So they're definitely changing the playing field. And I think traditional medical technology companies, pharma companies are, in a way, they need to pull up their socks, because otherwise they're going to lose out to this system that's being created.
Amazon just announced the launch of their Fitbit today. I don't know if you guys saw that. So it's sort of like, and they not only have access to consumers and know us, intimately well by having all of our data, but they also have tremendous capital and resources, right? Also to just create different types of advanced opportunities.
And that's really as you say, it's that ecosystem, and for us to partner with the relevant companies that have the access to consumers, because at the end of the day, it's the access to, if we actually want to change the healthcare system, we actually have to bring consumers on the journey. And because the consumers themselves don't realize it right now, but they can actually help with bringing some change about for themselves. So definitely those partnerships are going to be important for us. And we're open to partnerships.
So I wanted to ask a question from Q&A section. We actually have a couple of very interesting questions, but I don't want to open huge boxes of subjects because we don't have enough time. So hopefully we'll be able to ask our guests today to answer those questions in the emails. But one question, since we're on a FemTech Plus, State of FemTech Plus events, and this is regarding women and also referring to a book that someone mentioned in the chat earlier, so The Invisible Women. So the question is, do we see ways of digital health to close the data gap between men and women? Much of clinical and preclinical research is aimed towards men with negative outcomes in drug and monitoring development for women. So everyone who read the book is aware how huge this gap is really there. I think we would never imagine that it's actually happening, but is digital health really a way to close this data gap? Can we do something about it?
So to me,
very, very good. Sorry. I think it's a really good question. I mean, when you look at clinical trial data, it's only in 1997 that we started including women into clinical trials. So if you look at longitudinal data, we just have just 23 years of data for women. We didn't exist before that for any drug trial. I think I completely agree that digital health will help, but we still have a very long way to go. I mean, one of the areas that I work in tremendously is the whole area of menopause. And we're looking at data for menopause, and we started with nothing because who's going to collect data for menopause? Whose problem is it? Is it a problem for an OBGYN? Is it a problem for primary care physician? Is it a, who has ownership of menopause? And yet it is a disease that we have 1 billion women suffering from for 15 to 20 years of their life, and we're not putting in any effort into that.
So to me, it's less about digital health and more about women for women's health to systemically address this gender disparity in healthcare. We need more female founders. We need more female investors. We need more female business leaders around the table taking a stand for women's health and not accepting being marginalized in clinical trials and innovation in leadership, right? And I see that movement starting, and some of us around the table see each other in different forums, right? Because there are other forums popping up all over the world. And to me, we're at the tip of the spear of this movement, and hopefully it will really continue.
I agree. It's shaping the way forward, and certainly it's about having examples. And I think certainly from my perspective as a female founder in digital health, is I see this as a golden opportunity for women to accelerate the silent chronic diseases that are affecting them.
So we're actually having discussion earlier a bit in the subject of intersection between FemTech and digital health. And as I said at the beginning, they are very, very connected, and one is a part of another. But we were talking about that a lot of diseases that are typical for women, just related to women, like menopause, for example, which maybe we shouldn't call a disease, but it is something that is impacting a lot of women. They are easily prevented or helped with tracking the information, tracking data. So there's a lot of things that is impacting women currently and could be maybe not solved completely, but at least we can ease this transformation for a lot of women if we give them a solution to actually act earlier, to act faster. Usually we go to the doctor when something is already happening, and with digital health we believe that we can actually start seeing the symptoms way before they become symptoms. We can start reacting, we can get the correct meds before the problem is really big. So would you agree that digital health is actually, in a way at least, is I don't know how to say it. I wanted to say that the digital health is something that can actually help women with their life, not just with illness, not just with going to the doctor or contacting the doctor, but to start a lot earlier and prevent what's happening.
So I think the central notion of where we're moving today in healthcare is the whole aspect of preventative healthcare, personalized healthcare, preemptive healthcare, and predictive healthcare. I mean, that's where we want to get to. We want to get to the area of what we call precision medicine, precision health, where we're making precise, we're giving people precise tools, we're giving them precise technology, precise drugs or devices or whatever they need at that point, meeting the consumer, meeting the patient where they are. Not one size fits all. So that is the transition that we're moving to, and definitely digital health will help in providing those tools. Now, whether people actually follow it and the infrastructure and platforms are set up to talk to each other, that's not something that's beyond the scope of the consumer to do at this point.
Yeah, to me, it's an enabler of better health. So if I'm more aware and I'm more engaged, I'm more empowered to take constructive action. So just simple things, when I started counting my steps from, Apple Watch, suddenly I notice and I care and I feel badly if I don't get my steps in, where before I had no idea how many steps I was getting in. So it was irrelevant, right? So it is definitely an enabling tool. to make me more aware, more empowered, and take the right actions. But again, it's also important that we understand what the data means, like in the case of steps, right? We know what good looks like, 20,000 steps a day for someone like me, so I could set a goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess coming back to what people are expecting, people hope. There's people have hope, or sometimes they lose hope. They're hoping for a clear and immediate diagnosis when they go to see the doctor, but they rarely get one. And I think this is unfortunately what's been happening with a lot of women's silent diseases. Is there's often you know, women going to a doctor and they don't actually have the evidence. They don't have a lot of, you know, an accurate record of their symptoms. They haven't been monitoring things. And so they go back to square one every time they see another doctor, or they get a different opinion. And so they don't have that sort of the path or their history to look back and go, oh, actually, this is when it started. This is when this problem started. And a good friend of mine, you know, she's gone through this road with breast cancer. And, you know, that's an example of, you know, if you start off, you get diagnosed, and then you're sent down a path of having chemo and various drugs. And then, you know, you might get told to take this particular treatment. And then that might end up with you actually having another cancer in 5 years. But if you, and this is where I guess having a person involved in that journey and having some information can often mean that they can go and research themselves. And I know that, you know, I know some, you know, many doctors complain that, you know, people will come in and go, I've got this XYZ really horrible disease when they come in and see them. And that's really horrendous for doctors. But I guess on the other side of it is sometimes, you know, if a person is seeing multiple doctors, they're going to get multiple opinions and they do get confused. So at least if they can go in with some information, it may be better than no information.
Yeah, so I think I have 100 questions more in my head, but unfortunately we're running out of time, and it was a great question to close up, I think.
I just wanted to ask one more question, just a quick one, because you mentioned the precision medicine that is often mentioned as the new and very strong trend currently. But what do you think are other trends except those we already discussed today? What is in the future for digital health? Any specific trends?
Well, I think we'll also see tests. Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say 5G connectivity is going to be very big for us, and it's going to become a game changer, which will provide access. I think we are all in the world overall. We are coming to a point of being in an experiential economy, and I think every facet of what our lives are, it's virtualization of that. So looking at technologies that are providing experiential kind of experiences. So, you know, a lot of the work that's going on in AR and VR and holograms, all of this I see as future. I also see a lot of work in terms of 3D printed medications and, you know, digital twins. So those are what people are working on now over the next 5 years.
I think what we've also seen with COVID is a mix of health and what's happening in our borders, right? So we also see remote testing, you know, for safety. We're seeing this with COVID. There's companies that have remote testing, and then, you know, what happens with that data? How does a person accumulate that for their own information? But what I see is that health may or may not become part of a digital passport, right? Think about that. You know, can you cross from one border to another if you have or don't have immunization, for example? So, you know, we will see an expectation that you have your records of whether you've been immunized. This is...
And I would say a couple things. One I already said, which is more women for women's health. I really believe women will drive this movement
Yeah.
and right-sizing focus and investment in women's health. The other, I believe, is consolidation. There are too many point solutions. So we've seen roll-ups in other places. I think it will happen in digital health. And then the last is more unconventional partnerships that have to get created. So that is exciting and intriguing.
Okay, we're waiting for almost all of those. Digital health passports sound a bit scary, so maybe not for that. It's a bit
Sorry.
no, like if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. But yeah, generally it is very exciting. It is worth looking at this market, especially that it goes down to other markets as well, to other industries. I think digital health has huge impact on everything that happens in lifestyle and in other other subjects of tech. But yeah, I guess this is all for today. Thank you so much for participation, for sharing your amazing knowledge. I guess we could stay here for hours and hours.
Yeah, I feel like much more wiser after that conversation, and special thanks to Maree for joining us in the middle of her night.
Thank you, Maree.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And I think after our four events from this series of State of FemTech Plus, we're going to make a short break, but we're coming soon with new topics, new themes that need more exposure. So thank you very much for today once again, and see you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for great questions.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.